Hi guys, how are you guys doing? Hope you all are doing great. Today we're gonna start with our fourth chapter of the special senses, and that is the senses of hearing. In our previous three chapters, all we were discussing about was how image is formed at the retina, and then how that retina will make the vision clear, how it then makes receptors, stimulates the receptors, and then how finally then the receptors will take it to the brain and the image will be formed. Now here we're going to study about, instead of the eye, we're going to deal with what is called as the ear. And we all know that what is the function of ear? That the function of ear is basically to produce sound and for us to hear different frequency sounds. Now before going into your functions and physiology of it, let us have a general knowledge about the different parts present in the ear and about its general anatomy. All right. First of all is that you have, this is the ear, right? This is basically the three parts of the ear. You have the external ear consisting of the your tympanic membrane. Then you have the internal middle ear, which is consisting of the malleus, incus, stapes, your oval window, and then you have the internal ear or the inner ear, which is consisting of your cochlea, the semilunar vesicule. All right? Those were the three parts of the ear. Now, how sound is transmitted from this tympanic membrane all the way to the cochlea, which is present in the inner ear. So when the sound, for example, this sound is coming, so this is going to go and strike this tympanic membrane. On striking this tympanic membrane, it is going to enter into the middle ear. So passing from the tympanic membrane, it will enter into the malleus. Attached to the malleus, you can see, is the incus. So from the malleus, the sound will be transported from the malleus to the incus. Now attached to the incus, you can see that you have this stapes. So now the sound will travel from the incus to the stapes. And then from the stapes, you have this small window. This is called as the oval window. And from the stapes, it will enter into the oval window. And finally, from the oval window, the sound will be then transmitted to the cochlea in the inner ear. Okay. Now, two things are going to be done. When sound has to be supplied to the inner ear, to the cochlea, what will happen is that this oval window, this will move in the inward direction, and the malleus and the incus and the stapes will move in the downward direction. Due to moving on the downward direction, this will move in the forward direction. The fluid will move in the forward direction, carrying the sound vibrations into the cochlea. Now, when these malleus, incus, and stapes move in the forward direction, they will cause the oval window to move backward. As a result, the fluid and the sound vibrations present in the oval window will move, instead of inward, it will move in the backward direction. Okay. Second is your impedance matching by the ossicular system. What happens in this one is that basically this one, impedance matching is just you're telling that the difference between this malleus, incus, and stapes, according to their distance, you can see that between the malleus, incus, and stapes, they're not far from one another. Their only difference of distance is about 3/4. So 3/4 the malleus and incus is present from that of stapes. The difference between them is the force of movement. Right? So this is going to reduce. So for example, when this sound vibration will come from the tympanic membrane, enters into the malleus. Now once it enters into the malleus, what it will do is that it is going to decrease, because now as they're going to move, so obviously they have to contract. So on contracting, they will come close and close to one. Coming close to one another will decrease the distance. When the distance will decrease, the force has to be increased. For example, you see this one, right? If this is one thing and this is the other thing, right? And here this thing has to be transmitted from here to here. So obviously the force will increase, but as they're moving, so have to contract. So the distance between them, they will start to decrease and they will come close and close to one another, right? For example, let's make a simple example. Like for example, in your blood vessels, what happens is that when the blood vessels, they become narrow, their distance decreases, then a large amount of force has to be applied so that they can be passed. Same is the case here, that when sound has to be passed from them, the distance between them, they will constrict, they will become narrow. So due to which the sound waves have to exert a great amount of force to pass from the malleus to the incus to the stapes to finally reach the oval window to reach into the cochlea. This process is called as the impedance match. Okay. Now you have another you have an important topic that is called as the attenuation of sound by contraction of the tensor tympani and stapedius muscle. Now in our previous general topic we studied about this one, right? Present in the posterior side of the stapes, incus, and present in the posterior side of tympanic membrane, you have two muscles, the tensor tympani muscle and the stapedius muscle. Now what is the function of these two muscles is that they help in decreasing their elasticity of the tympanic membrane, making it more rigid and more tough. So for example, if there was no muscles present here, there will be no force of strength, right? Like if this is a pencil, right? If this pencil has not my hand, for example, my hand is a muscle. Obviously, if this is not, it will drop. It will be soft. But if I hold this pencil with my hand, it will not drop. Right? Same is the case here, that to maintain the strength and give the strength to this tympanic membrane, you have two muscles called the tympani muscle and your stapedius muscle. And if they're not present, then this will become soft and collapse and sound will not be able to pass from the tympanic membrane all the way to the cochlea. Okay? Alright, now what happens is that was, now when we have a low frequency sound, right? The sound's frequency is low. How it is then going to be transmitted from the tympanic membrane to the cochlea and from the cochlea to the nervous system. Well, as we studied that you have that at that tympanic membrane, you had the two muscles, the tensor tympani muscle and the stapedius muscle. Now these two muscles are present at this area, present at this stapes, incus, and malleus area. Here is where the two muscles are attached, called the tensor tympani muscle and the stapedius muscle. Now when these two muscles are stimulated, what they will do is that they will cause the inward movement of the malleus and incus to move in the inward direction and the stapes to move in the outward direction. So in this way they will cancel the effect of one another, and only the ones that are required, the low frequency sounds, they will then reach the oval window, and from the oval window move inward and it will finally reach into the cochlea. Then as a result, from the cochlea by means of the nerves, it will reach the central nervous system. This type of reflex is called as the attenuation reflex. And in this way, by doing so, it will decrease your frequency to about 30 to 40 decibels. And this is important because if you have a sound that is coming and its frequency is too loud, for example, if you're in a wedding house, their frequency is very loud, and if that amount of frequency comes and touches your ear, obviously what it will do is that it is going to destroy all of this cochlea. So in order to maintain this cochlea, we have a reflex that is called as your attenuation reflex, which will help to decrease that frequency so that a normal amount or less than normal range of sound can pass through it without going to damage the cochleas. Okay, so that was about this one. And next, second function of it is that it is going to do damping effect. What is the damping effect? The damping effect is that basically, for example, I am in this whole room, right? And in this room, I just want to hear the noise that is coming from the computer, and I don't want to hear the noise that is coming from my father, from my mother, from my sister. So what will my this reflex will do is that it is going to cancel the effects or make the frequency of my father's impulse, my mom's impulse, my sister's impulse so low, and my computer impulse so high that only then I will be able to hear my computer sounds, and everything else will be damped and will not be able to pass, and I will not be able to hear. The third function it is doing that is not still confirmed is that when a person speaks. Alright, and the third function that they have told to you here is that the voicemail is that when a person is speaking him or herself. Now, why doesn't the person he or himself feel that he or she is speaking a very high tone? That is due to this reflex that is called the attenuation reflex, that it is gonna decrease its frequency so much that the person will think that it's normal. That is why it is not so loud. So these were the three functions of the attenuation reflex. So this is basically helping the cochlea, decreasing the frequency so that to prevent any damage. It will help in damping of unnecessary sound waves and also decreases the frequency of person's own sound. right? Now, how sound is transmitted through the bone? We know that basically this cochlea, this is present within a bone. So how that sound is going to pass within this bone? That is going to be basically done by this method, right? That is basically through that bone is that in that bone which is present near the temporal lobe in the skull, there should be some electronic vibration. Whenever there's electronic vibrations, that vibrations in the temporal bone will cause it to vibrate. Due to this vibrations, and sound waves will be generated, and then sound will be produced, and from there it will pass through the bone all the way to the central nervous system. And if there's no vibration taking place through the bone, then the sound will not unable to pass through the bony membrane. All right, so that. Now we will study a little bit detail about this cochlea. First, let's know about the general anatomy of the cochlea. All right, and the general anatomy of the cochlea is basically this diagram, right? This is basically a cochlea, and now basically cochlea is like this coil. But now in order to understand it, we have done it in uncoiled. And on uncoiling, we see that it basically consists of the three layers. The first layer is the scala vestibuli, then you have the scala media, then you have the scala tympani. Separating the scala vestibuli from the scala media, there is a membrane called the Reisner's membrane. And separating the scala media from the scala tympani, you have the membrane called the basal membrane, which is consisting of this organ of Corti, which is very important in generation of sound. Okay? All right, then you had that how the sound is going to be transmitted through this cochlea. Now we know that when the stapes, they're going to move downward, the oval window moves in the forward direction. On moving in the forward direction, they will pass the impulses all the way from the scala vestibuli into the scala media, from the scala media through the basal membrane into the scala tympani, right? Now, if they have to move in the upward direction, stapes will move upward. Obviously, the oval window will move backward. All this process will be repeated. From the sound waves from the scala tympani, move back from the basilar membrane into the scala media. From the scala media back through the Reisner's membrane into the scala vestibuli. Right? So that was how it is being done. Okay. And that is all. Okay, then what is the basilar membrane and resonance in the cochlea? That we have studied that the cochlea basically consists of the organ of Corti, and in the organ of Corti you have these sensitive hair cells which are consisting of two types, an inner hair cells and an outer hair cells, right? And it is the inner hair cells which perform more function as compared to the outer hair cells. And the frequency in the lengths of these basilar fibers are gonna increase when we move down from this base of the cochlea all the way to the apex of the cochlea. The diameter of the fibers and its frequency is gonna decrease from the base to the apex. So as we are going from the base to the apex, the fibers will increase from 1 to 2 to 3, 4. Whereas the diameters, they will start to decrease, and to decrease and decrease the frequencies, they will also decrease. So we can say that only the length increase, but the diameter and frequency decreases from going from the base of the cochlea to the apex of the cochlea. Then we have the transmission of the sound waves in the cochlea. What is the traveling waves? The traveling waves are basically going to be in simple direction. Basically gonna be from the high frequency to the middle frequency to the low frequency. Now in this basilar membrane you have different points, right? Different positions. There's a high frequency position, middle frequency position, and a low frequency position. And depending upon their and about the impulses that are coming from the sound wave, the person will be aware that the frequency is a high, or it is slow, or it is medium, right? Now, for example, what is that? For example, I'm hearing a sound coming, and its frequency is very high. So obviously it will do the same things. Oval window, they will move in downward, or will move inward, and they will produce this high frequency up till here. And beyond here, then no frequencies will be generated, no sounds will be generated. Then in middle frequency, they will come to the middle of the cochlea and then stop. Whereas the low frequency will go all the way to the apex of the cochlea, and then it will stop and form this amplitude. So by depending upon here, the brain becomes aware about which type of frequency the sound waves is containing. It is a high frequency, it is a medium frequency, or a low frequency. And this process is called as the traveling waves, how it travels from one point to another point. Okay? All right. Then the amplitude, obviously, what is it? That obviously when they're going to move all the way inward, then they're going to come back in the middle direction, and then from there back into the outward. So according to here, we will be able to know their amplitude. Like here, this is its amplitude. Here, there are these two amplitudes. Then we have this amplitude. So depending upon the different points, we can come to know about the amplitude. And amplitude is formed whenever the sound waves are vibrate. So whenever the sound vibrations will go, sound waves, if they're generated in high frequency, the high frequency fibers are going to vibrate, then the high frequency amplitude will be generated. Here, if the medium fibers vibrate, your amplitude will be determined. Here, if low frequency fibers vibrate, then here will be the amplitude determined. Okay.